All right, today we're going to dive into a world that, well, it operates just beyond our senses. We're talking about a world of unseen forces and really mysterious illnesses, all seen through the lens of the book, The Jinn and Human Sickness. We're going to look at how this belief system explains what seems totally unexplainable and how it offers a path to healing and, protection.
So just imagine this for a second. You're a fire chief, and you get a call to a house where fires are just spontaneously erupting every 30 minutes. This isn't some made-up story. It's a real account from our source material, and it's a completely baffling event that just defied any normal explanation. I mean, get this, even clothes that were soaked in water weren't safe. This one impossible event really sets the stage for everything we're about to unpack.
So this brings us to the big question, right? When you're faced with something that seems to just break the laws of physics, how does a system of belief step in and provide an explanation? That's the puzzle we're going to try and piece together today, using the concepts laid out in the book.
To start piecing this whole puzzle together, we have to begin with the mysteries of the unseen. The book basically argues that before you can even think about a solution, you first have to understand what it believes is the root cause of all these strange events.
And you know what? The book gives a direct answer right off the bat. It says that these inexplicable phenomena, like the spontaneous fires, are the work of beings from an unseen world, the jinn.
Well, that naturally brings us to our second section, the world of the jinn. If we want to grasp their potential influence on our world, we really need to understand what they are, at least according to this text.
So the book defines jinn as beings with these light, non-dense bodies that were created from fire. And here's a really key detail. Their physical nature is supposedly what allows them to interact with our world. The text explains that because their bodies are non-dense, they can actually enter a human body, kind of like how air can pass through a more solid object.
Okay, so what might they look like? Well, the source mentions several forms that people have reported, a lot of it rooted in folk belief. These can range from animals like snakes and black cats, all the way to a human form, but with one very specific telltale sign: goat's feet.
And this brings us to a really important distinction the book makes. See, on one hand, you have these folk beliefs, like the idea that jinn are afraid of wolves. But on the other hand, you have the orthodox Islamic perspective. Now, it absolutely affirms their existence, but it measures any other claims against Scripture, and it specifically warns that believing jinn can know the future is a dangerous falsehood.
So this leads us to our next section, when sickness is supernatural. According to the book's framework, the influence of the jinn isn't just limited to external events. It can also show up as physical and even mental illness.
The text outlines some very specific symptoms. While someone is awake, this might look like a sudden, strong aversion to religious practice, or maybe seizures that doctors just can't find a cause for. And then during sleep, it could be terrifying nightmares, severe anxiety, or talking really loudly. These are presented as key signs to look for.
So, if jinn can cause these problems, it begs the question, can humans direct them? And that brings us to Section 4, the dangers of witchcraft. The book presents this as the main way a person could intentionally use jinn to harm other people.
Now, for a pretty powerful case study, the text looks at one of history's most famous legends, the Curse of the Pharaohs. Was it just a myth that was born out of coincidence, or does this framework offer a different explanation?
The timeline of what happened is pretty chilling. After the tomb was opened, a whole series of mysterious deaths began. First, you have Lord Carnarvon, the guy funding the whole thing. He dies just weeks later. Then, over the next 6 years, he was followed by more than a dozen other people connected to the discovery. These are the historical facts that really fueled the legend of the curse.
So, here's the crucial point, the book's interpretation. It argues that this wasn't some mystical curse coming from the mummy itself. No. Instead, it was an act of powerful ancient witchcraft, where jinn were basically bound as eternal guardians to protect the tombs. This completely reframes the whole story.
Okay, so we've explored the problems. Now let's turn to the solutions. That's Section 5, Healing Through Faith. This part details the remedies and the therapeutic practices that are described in the book for dealing with these kinds of supernatural afflictions.
The book provides a very clear, step-by-step ritual for cleansing a home. It's a multi-day process that involves directly addressing the jinn, invoking the Covenant of Solomon, and, if that doesn't work, using water that has had specific prayers recited over it, which is then sprinkled all throughout the house.
But who can actually perform these remedies? Well, the source is very specific about the qualities of a true practitioner. The big emphasis is on their sincere intention, their deep theological knowledge, and their personal piety, as well as preparing the space itself. It's a whole holistic approach. It's not just about saying the right words.
Now, in direct contrast to that, the text also lists warning signs of a fraud. These are basically red flags to watch out for, things like asking for personal details, like a mother's name, prescribing bizarre rituals, muttering, or just behaving inappropriately with patients. These actions are presented as clear signs of someone who isn't authentic.
Finally, we're going to turn from the cure to prevention. The book outlines what it calls a shield of protection. These are the proactive steps a believer can take to guard against supernatural harm in the first place.
So the book gives a list of 10 key practices. They really fall into a few different categories. You've got specific prayers and recitations, consistent daily acts of remembrance like just mentioning God's name before eating, and then maintaining a righteous lifestyle. The core idea is that this combination of conscious action and faith creates a kind of spiritual shield.
You know, this powerful quote from the book really gets to the heart of the matter. It emphasizes that true spiritual strength and sincerity come from humility and self-correction, not from trying to be famous or getting recognition. And that's a crucial lesson for both the healer and the person looking for help.
And all of that brings us to a final, bigger question. The framework we've just explored is one culture's way of making sense of the unknown. And it kind of leaves us wondering, how do other belief systems around the world grapple with these exact same mysteries, the events and illnesses that science just hasn't explained yet? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.